Okay, this is last I'm going to talk about Eric Clanton, and as you can see right here, I'm interested in helping to uh, perpetrate the end of civil society. In other words, what he wants to do is end civil society. Now, he's anti-fascist, but yet what he wants to do is cause a fascist thing, which is an oxymoron. Anything he talks about is oxymoron. Everything he talks about is being communist, a fascist, a Nazi, a KKK, basically what the left likes to do. To end civil society. But here's the proof right here of these morons. I mean, the people that they claim that they don't like, they are it. A prime example. So here, watch this.
The stabby Brit. And today I'd like to talk to you about the use of the term fascist. You see, people get called fascist a lot these days. And most of them, frankly, are not fascists. I'm guilty of this myself. I have called people fascists who clearly aren't fascist. However, I don't think that's so much a problem, providing we understand how and why the term is being used. After all, just because somebody doesn't hold every single viewpoint of a fascist doesn't mean you can't reasonably call them a fascist. To my mind, as long as an individual is adhering closely to the core tenets of fascism, one can reasonably call them a fascist. So who does cling to the core tenets of fascism? Well, this video is going to help us find out. For in this video, we shall compare the views of fascists to the views of your generic Trump supporter. And just to make things interesting, we'll even throw in a bit of Antifa as well. Let's begin! Fascists promote the idea of a one-party state. This is because fascists are inherently authoritarian, and nothing takes away power like rival political groups. In a fascist society, there is one political party, the Fascist Party. Trump supporters do not support a one-party state. They are quite happy with the idea that there should be multiple parties. They just generally favour Republicans, although not all of them. A great many Trump supporters previously voted Democrat. This is one of the benefits of a multiple-party system, and Trump supporters recognise this. Antifa, on the other hand, promote the idea of a one-party state, as shown by their reaction to the election of Donald Trump. A great many members and supporters of Antifa are also Marxists, and Marxism promotes a one-party state for much the same reason as fascism does. Next, democracy. Fascists hate democracy. Democracy has no place in their one-world order. After all, if you have a vote, people could vote incorrectly, i.e. vote for something other than the fascist candidate. Besides, they have a one-party system. What would be the point of having an election? The leader of the party is the leader of the nation. Problem solved. Trump supporters are pro-democracy. They are proud of their nation's democratic history, and many of them consider freedom to be synonymous with democracy. In fact, some of them are so fond of democracy that they consider foreign wars be justified if the end goal, or at least the end result, is placing a democratic government into power. As far as your typical Trump supporter is concerned, a government that was not created through democratic means is a government without any legitimacy whatsoever. And this is in stark contrast to our friends from Antifa, who believe that a government that was not chosen by them has no legitimacy. They abhor democracy, because democracy can give you the wrong answer. In the ideal world of the Antifa member, there would be no democracy. There would simply be an Antifa leader in power for all time. Next, let's talk about their views on white people. Fascists abhor the idea of a white race. Yes, I mean that. Actual fascists from actual Nazi Germany would have been utterly repulsed by the idea of the white race. You see, the Nazis had the idea that Aryans were the perfect example of humanity. Aryans essentially being people of pure German blood. And anything that diluted that pure German blood was to be expunged from society. While technically all other races could be considered Untermensch, certain races were highlighted more often than not as examples of inferior. The Jews are an obvious example. However, the Slavs and the Romani and people from Eastern European communist nations were most often cited as examples of Untermensch. All of these people are white. The idea of having a mixed race white people is abhorrent and antithetical to the Nazi ideals of racial purity. Therefore, given the fact that the Nazis considered the vast majority of the white race to be impure, they can be fairly described as hating white people. Trump supporters do not hate white people. In fact, a majority of Trump supporters appear to be white. They do not appear to make any kind of distinction among groups of white people. Among Trump supporters can be found white people of all descents, Germanic, Slavic, and so on. Also can be found among the groups are non-whites, none of whom show any particular ill will toward white people either. But do you know who does show contempt towards white people? Antifa! According to Antifa, white people are responsible for pretty much every terrible thing that has ever happened throughout history. All white people are guilty of these things. All white people are born with innate privilege and must submit themselves upon the altar of social justice to atone for the crime of being born white. In an ideal world, all white people would be bred with the superior black or Hispanic races in order to purge the white race. That are simply rounded up and killed. Because of this bigotry, this constant desire to portray white people as evil and refusal to acknowledge the good things white people have done throughout history, Antifa can be fairly described as hating white people. Next, political violence. Fascists love political violence. Fascists will typically engage in political violence in order to justify their position. They will typically find one specific group, for example, Jews or communists, commit acts of violence against this group, then claim that the violence is necessary and indeed justified in order to protect the nation from their chosen demonized group. Of course, fascists are very rarely acting in self-defense and are almost always the aggressor. This is why a rise in fascism is always linked to a rise in violence. This is, of course, in stark contrast to the supporters of Donald Trump, who by and large universally condemn the use of violence as a means of political discourse. Trump supporters can and will use violence in self-defense, as is permitted by the Constitution and indeed by US law. However, the key word is defense. Trump supporters use violence to protect themselves from other aggressive parties, not to actively attack their political opponents. And currently, the main source of violence against the Trump supporters is, of course, Antifa, who actively attack their political opponents and consider themselves morally justified in doing so. Antifa seek to spread themselves and their policies through acts of violence. They justify these acts of violence by calling their opponents Nazis and claim that without Antifa's violence, fascist violence would be on the rise. It is no coincidence, therefore, that a rise in Antifa has been correlated with a rise in violence. Antifa, despite what they may claim, are almost always, if not universally, the aggressor in Antifa vs non-Antifa political conflict. Next we will look at free speech. Fascists abhor free speech. After all, if people are allowed to say what they want, they might say something that goes against the party line. They might say something that brings disunity to the authoritarian fascist utopia. Therefore, anyone who seeks to exercise their free speech must be punished severely. Ideally, they should be killed. This is in stark contrast to the views of Trump supporters, who believe that free speech is a fundamental human right that must be defended at all costs. All speech, no matter how terrible, how insulting, how offensive, has a right to exist. And of course, I'm sure we all know by now Antifa's position on free speech. Antifa are entirely in favour of free speech, but what they oppose is hate speech, which is of course any speech they disagree with. Anyone guilty of hate speech should be violently silenced, ideally by smashing buildings, setting fire to things, committing physical assault, perhaps even murder, although thus far Antifa haven't quite committed to that. But I suspect they will, given the first opportunity. And finally, we look at economics. Fascism is a right-wing economic platform, It's essentially an offshoot of capitalism as far as the economy is concerned. Trump supporters, by and large, support capitalism, whereas Antifa, being made up of anarcho-communists, Marxists and other extreme left political-leaning people, is entirely anti-capitalist. So I think we can all agree now, who is the fascist?
Okay, Eric Clanton got scared, so he asked his criminal lawyer this question. California. My really good friend is being accused on social media of attacking someone at a protest. Now his name is being smeared on social media. Does he have any recourse, and can he be in any legal, civil, or criminal trouble because of these rumors? Well, we know who you are. You're Professor Eric Clanton. And I gotta go right here. I mean, uh, let's see. Here it is right here. That's the thing. But a group of us went to a protest that turned violent. Let me see, back to avoid the conflict, and the crowd moved and pressed. So several points we found ourselves in the midst of the other side, hitting and shoving people. Anyways, they they basically, the person in here said they basically identified the person who really did it. But the thing is, uh, well, this is Eric Clanton's post because someone found out he used Eric and Clanton's computer, but it's saying that fast forward to yesterday, all of a sudden the internet had identified my really good friend, a person who, uh, which right here, a good friend, as a person who attacked several people. You see, his identity, his job, and his address, and his family has been outed. A person who attacked several people. Okay, so Eric Clanton is running scared. But I got something else I'm going to show you later. But that will come soon.
And that it has to be a tool among many. A tool among, anarchists have a long tradition of creative forms of resistance. I think restorative justice is just one of those things. And I think, moreover, we have to keep it on our side of the line, so to speak. We ought to be suspicious of the state's cooptation.
Now we got a bunch of these Antifa people that are running scared. You got this one guy right there that you're seeing right now. His comment he left. I live near Berkeley and I have been involved in some of the recent protests where I wore a mask and support the Antifa side to keep fascists off of campus. Well, the fascist is Antifa for one. Let me see. But after seeing all these Nazis have done to out one of our own, I'm getting scared. Well, see, they have proven that this professor is one of their own. I like how they do that. So they confirmed what we already knew. These guys found out his full name, address, and place of work and education, about 1 million photos on him, even what car he drives. They found out his teaching schedule and what room he'll be in at what time. I just spent 5 minutes on this site, and they're talking about getting someone to drive to his house and throw a brick through the window, or raiding the next class he teaches. Okay, so they're scared. Well, here's the thing about them. A lot of them have been getting arrested and locked up, and a lot of them is doing jail time. These are college kids that just threw away their career by using a U-lock as a weapon. But let's go on for more. So they found another video of Eric Clanton. Here we go. It's the same guy. They already did a ID verification on him. So it's not one. Now it's up to 2. We have them on 2. And that's 2 aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon. It's getting very serious for this guy. Each of these charges can be a 20-year prison. So we're looking at 40 right now. How many more videos we're going to see of this guy? And how is he going to be charged? And that means a lot of the students that he teach is also in this. So Berkeley is going to have to also remove some of these students that have committed aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Now this is his OK Cupid page, helping to facilitate, I think it is, the end of civil society. That's what he believes in. I teach and learn for a living. In my off time, I find ways to unleash, I guess. I can't read this. It's so small. Favorite book, I can't read what his favorite books is. Let me see. Something about a bike. I spend a lot of time thinking about revolution. I can read that. But this is what Eric Clanton is about. So let's go on. So Eric Clanton is trying to get legal representation. Yeah, but nobody's biting. And but you know what? We still need to take all these funding down. Uh, Not going by GoFundMe rules and take them down. The rules is that they do not indulge in illegal activity, and because Eric Clanton did illegal activity by aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, this should be taken down, and it should be brought to the attention of the GoFundMe account.